Okay, good morning. My name is Jean Booth. You guys are attending the Victims of Domestic Violence Marriage License Quarterly Performance Report Training. I also have on the line with me Julie Linsmith. She's the Social Service Specialist 3, and she will also be giving part of this presentation. We have a lot to go over today. Your time is important to us, just as it is important that we offer instruction and communication between our agency and yours. Some of this information may be a bit easy for those of you who've had our awards for years or who've attended the VOCA quarterly report training. But we do ask that you still actively listen and not multitask during this training, as we hope everyone will be able to learn a couple new things. Today we're going to go over the Marriage License Quarterly Report in detail by section and review and practice a lot of the common errors we see and questions that we get. We're going to be using the polling to keep this training as interactive as possible. The poll is anonymous. I am posting it in the chat box right now. If you can go ahead and click on that link to open a new internet tab or go on to your cell with that link, the poll will only be active during this training. And like I said, if you're on the poll, all the answers will be confidential. They are anonymous. We have no idea who answers. If you feel comfortable or cannot access the poll, you can also answer in the chat box. Again, your answers will be not anonymous, but they won't count for or against your agency for whatever reason. We just want to know that we're providing enough information and training to assist your agency with quarterly reporting. So our first poll question is, what part of Nevada does your agency primarily serve?
And if you haven't signed in right now, is a good time to sign in with your name and agency also. And we got a B in the chat box, Jean.
Awesome. I see that. Well, it looks like we've got a really good blend of Clark, rural, and Washoe counties. Oh, we've got two rurals in the chat box. Awesome. Welcome, everybody. Thank you. Our next poll question is, are you the person who will be responsible for completing the Marriage License Quarterly Performance Reports for your agency? Yes. A, B, no. Sometimes C, I'm backup. Or D, I have no idea. Okay, good. We've got an A and a C in the chat box. And looks like our primary answers are A and C in the poll as well, which is great. We really appreciate having people who are actually doing the work to attend these trainings. It's very helpful. And I'm going to go ahead and give it back over to Julie so she can talk about the purpose of these performance reports.
The Marriage License Performance Reports help us in several ways. They help us meet the state regulation that we need to collect data on those services being provided. They help us show trends over time. They help us show the work that's being done in Nevada, all the great work your agencies are doing. And they help us show the need for services in Nevada. And then it can also help increase the program effectiveness and service delivery. So overall, on the marriage license reporting, you want to report on all funding sources that provide services to domestic violence and sexual assault in your agency. You're going to count all primary victims served, and you're going to count secondary victims that were provided direct services. So the primary victim would be the person who was the victim of the domestic violence or sexual assault, and the secondary victims would be individuals that are dependent on the primary victim. So usually this means children. And so you wouldn't count the children in, for say, information and referrals, but you would count them in shelter if you provided them bed nights in emergency shelter. So agencies must maintain documentation of all individuals served and services provided. It's important that you have that. We will occasionally ask for that at monitoring. We don't need you to submit it with each report. Now I want to talk about the reporting guide. You all should have received a copy of the Victims of Domestic Violence Marriage License Quarterly Reporting Guide. It's also attached to the calendar invite. The guide has not been updated since last year, so last year's version is the version we're still using. There haven't been too many changes to the marriage license report. We'll talk about the main change. And if you guys feel like it's needed, we can update the reporting guide to reflect that. But you should have the reporting guide. So the next poll question is, did you receive the reporting guide? A, yes, B, no, C, I don't know. And if you don't have the reporting guide, you can always email Jean and she can send you that really easily. So we'll give people a few more seconds to answer. I see I don't know in the poll, so that's, or in the chat. And then we have some kind of a mix in the poll. So we have 67% reporting yes, 17% no, and 17% I don't know. So if you're one of those no's or I don't know, just feel free to email Jean or myself and we can send you that reporting guide right after the training. So the next poll question is, did you use the reporting guide last year to assist you in completing your report? A, yes, a lot. B, yes, once or twice. C, no. D, I've not completed a report yet, so maybe you're new to the reporting part. Or E, none of the above. We have a D in the chat, so we have someone who's new to filling out the report, and we have some people who are new to filling out the report on the poll. So if you guys need more help in this training, always feel free to reach out to us. The first time or two that you fill out the report might be a little more confusing than once you get used to it regularly. But it seems like we have 17% saying yes a lot, 17% saying yes once or twice, and 17% who have not used it, and 50% that have not completed a report yet, so they would not have used that reporting guide. So for that 17% of you who have, or the, I guess, 34% of you who have used the reporting guide, for those of you who have used it, how useful did you find it? From 1, not at all, to 5, very. Oh, good. People in this group have found it more useful, it looks like, than previous sessions of this training, so that's good. We always want to make sure the resources we're providing you and spending our time developing for you are what you guys need. So always welcome feedback on any of these tools. If it's missing a section or you don't understand how something's described or think that something else would be more helpful, we're always open to suggestions. All right. So a little more on the reporting guide. If you haven't looked at it, which a lot of the new people won't, it has a table of contents at the beginning that lets you kind of know what's in the guide. And what's in the guide is step-by-step instructions on how to complete the quarterly report and the key terms and definitions. We don't want to go through all the key terms and definitions in this training because we don't want the training to be 4 hours. But if you're first time filling out the report, it will be useful for you to read all those key terms and definitions because some of them may surprise you. They might not be the same as what you thought. So I'm going to pass it over to Jean, who's going to talk about filling out the quarterly report.
Excellent. So these are the steps that you're going to need to complete each quarter to submit your marriage license quarterly report. We're going to go into more details on each of the steps, but you're going to verify that you have the correct form. You're going to complete the demographics tab, the direct services tab, and then the scope of work tab. Once all that's done, you're going to verify the data is accurate, and then finally submit. So step 1 is verifying that you have the correct form. You do this by looking at the marriage license report. It should have 5 tabs: the instructions tab, summary, demographics, direct service, and scope of work tab. Then you're going to go to the summary tab and look at the top. You should see your agency name and the grant number for your marriage license award. It should be a 318 number. The grant name should be Victims of Domestic Violence or Marriage License. The grant period should be July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022. This year's report is going to look a little bit different from last year's. If you've not received your quarterly report template for this year yet, you will receive it when you get your fully executed marriage license NOSA. We're currently working on getting these out to everyone and have sent about half of them. If you have not received your marriage license NOSA documents yet, you will get them in the next couple of days. If you have received your NOSA but are unsure if you have your quarterly reporting template, please contact me. My email is in this PowerPoint and in the chat box, and I'll be happy to send your quarterly report form again if your NOSA is executed. This is what your report's going to look like. If you can see in the bottom, the summary tab is selected, and at the top you can see the award information that we just discussed. Are there any questions over anything we've talked about so far?
I haven't seen any through the chat, Jean.
Okay, excellent. We're going to move on to the instructions tab. This is the tab that's the only one that's locked in this spreadsheet. Please read the instructions tab in full. There's a lot of helpful information here that will answer many of your questions, and if followed correctly, it will prevent us from requesting an amended report. I'm going to go ahead and give it over to Julie to talk about the demographics tab.
So step 2 is completing the demographics tab, and that tab has 10 questions. We'll go over each of them in detail. The first 3 questions are the total number of victims served, new and continuing. Remember, this will be from all funding sources. 2, total number of anonymous contacts, and 3, of the number of individuals reported, how many were new? And I know that's always a tricky one, so we'll go over that in detail. Remember to be reporting on all domestic violence and sexual assault victims that received that your agency served, regardless of funding stream. This means if you also receive VOCA and FISA funding, this report should show more victims served than your VOCA report. As your VOCA report will not show victims served with FISA funding, but this report will. So if you have questions about that, feel free to reach out to us or put them in the chat. So determining who is new. Determining who is new individuals are those served for the first time during the federal fiscal year. This can get a bit tricky because we report on the state fiscal year, and we'll go over the differences in that. But remember that the federal fiscal year is October 1st, 2021 through September 30th, 2022. You're going to ask yourself these questions. When was the last time this individual received services from our agency? And was this individual counted as new in a previous fiscal year quarter of this report? So the state fiscal year runs July 1 through June 30th, and the federal fiscal year runs October 1st to September 30th. This tends to be one of the most confusing parts of the report, and the biggest difference is those dates. We typically run all our awards on the state fiscal year, but that means that these reports will look different for quarter 2 because of the way we are reporting. And I know that marriage license is state funding and we run on the state fiscal year, but it was decided last year to keep the determination of who is new consistent with how it's determined for VOCA and FISA, so that agencies wouldn't have to change their reporting method for just marriage license, those that receive FISA and VOCA funding. So this is just a visualization to help you see why those victims will be new in quarter 2 state fiscal year report. It's because that will be the first quarter of the federal fiscal year. So when you send in your quarter 2 report, the number you report on question 1 should be equal to the number you report on question 3. So the total served should equal the total new. So that green arrow is when that would occur. So there's this slide again to remind you of the question to ask yourself, when was the last time this individual received services? And was this individual counted as new in the previous quarter of this report? So now we're going to go over a few practice questions and scenarios to see if you understand who will be new and who will not be new. So you are completing your agency's quarter 2 report for October 1st of 2021 through December 31st of 2021. Your agency saw 100 unique individuals during this time. How many of these individuals should you report as new? A, there's not enough information to know. B, 100 individuals C, 0 individuals, or D, 50 individuals. So I saw some quick responses, but we'll give people a few more seconds because I know that's a lot to process. Remember, you can answer in the chat too if you don't have access to the polling. All right, well, it looks like everybody thinks it's B, 100 individuals. Let's see if you're right. Yes, you are right. 100 individuals would be considered new. And this is because all individuals reported for that second quarter of the report are new, as it's the first quarter of the federal fiscal year. So here's another scenario. You are completing your agency's quarter 3 report for January 1st of 2022 through March 31st of 2022. You have an individual who came in for services in July of 2021, but you have not provided them services since. You provided them services in January of 2022. Would they be counted as new? A, yes. B, no. C, not enough information. So a few quick responses will give people a little bit longer to reread the question and really think about it. All right, it looks like 100% of you think A, they would be reported as new. Let's see if that's correct. It is correct, yes. The individual would be counted as new because they were not counted in the quarter 2 report. So this would be the first quarter of the federal fiscal year that they would be counted as new. They hadn't been counted as new before. You are completing your agency's quarter 3 report, January 1st, 2022 through March 31st, 2022, and you have an individual that you provided services to in February of 2022. She had received services previously from your agency in 2018. Would she be counted as new? Yes, no, or not enough information? Oh, I see an A in the chat. Good. Getting some answers in the chat too. All right, 100% of you think that's A, yes, and you are correct. You guys got all of those. They were too easy for you. But yes, since it's the first time they were served in that federal fiscal year, they would be new. So now let's talk about the next few questions on the demographic tab. This is just a summary of who should be reported for each of those sections, and we'll go over them in detail and show you the clues that should remind you of how you'll know who to report on in those questions. Again, all funding sources for domestic violence and sexual assault. Question 4 is, what system do you use to track individuals? If this tracking system changes during the grant period, let us know because I know there's only one spot on the form to report this. This question is often skipped, so please just remember to fill it out. It could be paper charts, Excel, or whatever electronic health record system you have to track victims served. Questions 5, 6, and 7 should be new individuals only, and you look for the green boxes. We'll talk about what that means. Question 8 should be all victims new and continuing. So instead of just new victims, question 8 is all victims served, new, continuing, and anonymous, and they can be counted multiple times in victimization, in different victimization categories. Question 9 asks how many were counted more than one type of victimization. We'll go over that question in detail because that one causes people problems. And question 10 should be all individuals new, continuing, anonymous. It should be all of those victims served. So now let's go through each one of those in detail. So here you'll see question 5, race and ethnicity. And you can see on the form that next to this section, it lets you know that this should be reported on new victims served only. You see that new only in all caps next to the race and ethnicity. Additionally, there's a note letting you know that the total for this section should equal the total of question 3, which is new individuals served for the quarter. Finally, when the section has the correct number of individuals reported in the box, the total should be green. That lets you know that the number for the section in this example is 50 equals the number reported on question 3, which is also 50, so the box is green. Do not change the color of the box yourself. The form will automatically change it when the number matches. If you can't get the box to be green, reach out to us and we can help you try to figure out what's going on. So here's an example of it filled out incorrectly. On this example, we can see that the race ethnicity section has not been completed correctly, as it only has 40 individuals that were reported, not the 50 that should have been based on the answer provided in question 3. We can see that the total box is shaded a light red to indicate that there is an error. Please do not submit a report with red boxes. Reach out to us if you don't know why the report is giving you a red box, and we can help. Occasionally it's a form, but usually there's just a small typo or some kind of number error that's causing that to turn red, so we can talk you through that and figure out what's going on. Question 6 is gender, and you can see on the form that next to the section it lets you know that you should only be reporting the section on new victims served. Additionally, there's a note letting you know that the total for the section should equal the total of question 3, new individuals served for the quarter. Finally, when the section has a correct number of individuals reported, the box with the total should be green. This lets you know that the number for the section, in this example 50, equals the number reported on question 3, which is also 50, so the box is green. Another thing you will see on this question is that if you report any victims on line 37 in the other category, you will be required to specify in the box to the right, now highlighted blue. If you have more than one quarter that requires the specification, please delete the specification from the previous quarter and just report on the current quarter in the box. We save all the previous versions of your report, so we'll have a quarter 1 report, quarter 2 report, 3, and 4 for you in your folder. So if we have questions on who was other in quarter 1 versus quarter 2, you can look at the different reports. So just put the specification for the current report. All right, so the next one is question 7, age. And you can see on this form that next to the section, it lets you know that it should be reported on new victims served. Additionally, you'll see that note letting you know it should total what question 3 is, the new individuals. And finally, you'll see that when it has the correct number reported, the total will be green. So the next section you'll see is question 8, victimization. You will see that next to the section name, it does not say new only. You see, it just says victimization. So in this section, you will count all victims served during the quarter, new, continuing, and anonymous. You will see that the total should be no less than the total in the demographics, line 13, or the total of all victims served, new, continuing, and anonymous. There's no less than because the number could be greater than the number of victims that were served if some of the victims reported more than one type of victimization. You would count the victims in each type of victimization you reported. You will see that the box at the bottom with the total is green if the number of victimizations reported is greater than or equal to the total number of victims served. You can see in this example that the total number of victimizations reported was 174. If you remember a few slides back, the total victims served in this quarter was 100. You can see that 174 is greater than 100. That is because some of the victims reported more than one type of victimization. You will see that there is also 2 types of victimization that require specification on the right if you report anybody in those types of victimization. They are hate crimes and other. Again, if you have multiple quarters, remember to delete the specification from the previous quarter and report the information only on the current quarter. One final reminder for this question is that no type of victimization can be greater than the total number of victims served, because each victim can be counted in each type of victimization only once. For example, none of the victimization types could have the number of 101 because only 100 victims were served. If you look at domestic and/or family violence in this example, there is 100 reported in that type. That is okay because all victims could be victims of domestic and/or family violence. But if it was 101, it would be incorrect and require revision. This is an example to show you that if you forget that the victimization section should be reported on all victims, not just new, you will get a red box at the bottom showing you that something is wrong. Also remember that all victimization definitions are in that reporting guide. Sometimes people put things in the other that do fall into one of the other categories. So, question 9, more than one type of victimization. This is the most frequently missed question, and it must make sense. So when we say it must make sense, if your agency served 100 victims during the quarter and the total victimizations reported on question 8, the previous question, was 110, then the number of individuals reporting more than one type of victimization could not be more than 10. An example that we see a lot is victimizations reported in question 8 equal the total number of victims served. So this would imply that none of the victims reported more than one type of victimization, since only one victimization was reported for each victim. But question 9 will have a number of victims that reported more than one type of victimization. This means that either not all victimizations were reported in question 8, or that answer 9 is incorrect. So the report would be sent back for revision. Question 10, special classification. Again, in this section, you see that it does not specify new only. So should be reported on all victims served, new, continuing, and anonymous. You will also notice that if you report any in the other category, it will require you specification on the right. So one last thing before we quiz you on some of these things, I wanted to talk about the difference between not reported and not tracked. The race, ethnicity, age, and gender questions all have these as options. Not reported means that your agency has a method for collecting this data field, but the victim declined to answer the question, either verbally or in writing. So if they filled out the form, they maybe skipped that question or told you they didn't want to answer that question. Not tracked means your agency does not track this field, either for all victims or those receiving certain services. For example, if your agency ran a hotline in a domestic violence shelter and does not collect age information on hotline calls, but does for victims staying in the shelter, the age category for all hotline victims would be not tracked. And then if someone was staying in your shelter and didn't want to report their age, that would be not reported. So let's quiz you on how well we explain that. So on question 6, gender, should that count new victims only? B, continuing victims only? C, anonymous victims only? D, all victims, new, continuing, and anonymous? Or E, none of the above? And it's not cheating if you want to look at the attachments or the report to get those hints where they are. I see someone answered A in the chat, and we also have A reported on the poll. Give people a few more seconds in case they're looking back a few slides to see what it should be. And then 100% of you all think it's A, and you are correct. It should be reported on new only. So on question 8, victimization, that should count A, new victims only, B, continuing victims only, C, anonymous victims only, D, all victims, new, continuing, and anonymous, or E, none of the above. Who should that question 8? We got a D in the chat, and we've got people saying D in the poll. Give people a few more seconds in case they haven't had a chance to answer yet. So everybody thinks that should be all victims, new, continuing, and anonymous. And you guys are correct. You guys are doing really great. Everybody's got some attention span for Friday. I'm impressed. All right, so let's go to the next question. Victims should only be counted once in question 8, victimization, regardless of how many types of victimization they report. Is that true or false? I'm going to read it one more time. Victims should only be counted once in question 8, victimization, regardless of how many types of victimization they report. Is that true or false? see some people, oh, false in the chat, and 100% of the people so far on the poll think false. And you guys are on it. We can't even fool you today at all with even tricky questions. Yeah, victims should be counted once in each type of victimization they report. Jean, do we have any questions so far?
I haven't seen any pop up, but you guys feel free to ask any questions in the chat box. We will go ahead and answer any questions that do pop up.
All right, I'm going to hand it over to you, Jean, for the Direct Services tab.
Excellent. So now that we've completed the demographics, we're going to complete the Direct Service tab. We're going to answer these questions for all individuals served, new, continuing, and anonymous. And you're going to answer these for all of your funding sources for victim services. These categories are divided into 7 categories: victim compensation, information and referral, personal advocacy and accompaniment, emotional support or safety services, shelter or housing services, criminal or civil justice system assistance, public presentations, or community education. This is a screenshot of what the Direct Service tab will look like, and you can see that all of the sections are in different colors to separate them from the categories. We're going to go through an overview on the Direct Service tab. If you answer no to the first question in any category, you should not have any services counted for that section. Definitions of these services can be found in the reporting guide, along with details on how to count the services provided for each question. The total number of individuals served in a section should always be equal to or less than the number of services provided. Direct Services tab should be completed on all victims served during the quarter, new, continuing, and anonymous. Our first section is victim compensation. You're going to count the number of victims that you assisted with a victim compensation application. VOCA Comp is different than VOCA funding that your agencies may provide to victims. It provides immediate financial assistance to qualified victims of violent crimes that occur in Nevada. This form can be found at voc.nv.gov, and we will go over VOCA compensation training in another training. Not all victims will be eligible for VOCA Comp. For example, if the victimization was not a violent crime, or if the crime occurred out of Nevada, or if the crime occurred over 2 years ago. All eligible victims might not be interested in applying for the victim compensation program. For example, some do not want to file a police report, which is a requirement of this program. You're only going to count the victims that you assisted to complete the application on this quarterly report. You're not going to count those that you simply told about the program or that did not qualify or did not want to apply for the program, for the compensation program. Remember, the number you report in this section can never be larger than the total number of victims that you served during the quarter. The next section is information and referral. This section will follow the format of all other sections in the Direct Services tab. You'll see the first question is, did your agency offer any services in this category for this quarter? If you answer no, then you can move to the next section. If you answer yes, you'll move on to question 13, which asks for the number of individuals provided services in this category during the quarter. Question 13 should count individuals only once, regardless of how many services they received. A1 through A4 should count the total number of services that were provided to victims. An example of this is if a victim received information about the criminal justice process from your agency once, and then referrals to other victim service programs 3 times. They would be counted as one individual on question 13, even though they received 2 types of services. One service would be counted on A1 because you provided this service, and 3 services would be counted on A3 because that service was provided 3 times. Remember not to just add the services to get the total service, because that would give you the wrong number of victims served when only one individual was served. Also, remember to count each time you provided each service, even if the same individual received the same service multiple times. The number served in a category can never be greater than the total number of individuals served on the demographic line 16. Since each individual must receive at least one service in the category to be counted on question 13, the sum of A1 through A4 must be equal to or greater than the number of individuals reported on question 13. This is because if each individual only received one service, then the sum of A1 to A4 would equal the number of individuals served. But if any victim receives more than one service, the sum of A1 through A4 will be greater than the number of victims reported. For the definition of each service, please see the reporting guide. You might be a little surprised with some of these definitions. The next category of direct services is personal advocacy and accompaniment. You can see that it is structured the same way as the information and referral section, with question 14 asking if your agency provided any services in this category during this quarter. Again, if you answer no, then you can skip to the next section. If you answer yes, then question 15 is asking for the number of individuals who received services in this category, and B1 through B10 is asking for the number of services offered in this category. The number of individuals receiving services in this category cannot be greater than the total number of victims on the demographic tab, and the sum of services in B1 through B10 must be equal to or greater than the number of victims reported for the category on line 15. You'll see that this section also has some questions about wait lists that need to be answered. The next category of direct services is emotional support or safety services. You can see that it is also structured the same way as the previous sections, with question 17 asking if your agency provided any services in this category during this quarter. Again, if you answer no, then you can skip to the next section. If you answer yes, then question 18 is asking for the number of victims who received services in this category, and C1 through C7 is asking for the number of services provided in this category. The number of individuals receiving services in this category cannot be greater than the total number of victims on the demographic tab, and the sum of services in C1 through C7 must be equal to or greater than the number of victims reported for the category on line 18. You will see that this section also has some questions about wait lists that need to be answered. The next category of direct services is shelter or housing services. You can see that it is structured the same way as the previous sections, with question 20 asking if your agency provided any services. And again, if you answer no, you can skip to the next section. If you answer yes, then question 21 is asking for the number of victims who received services in this category, and D1 through D3 is asking for the number of services provided in this category. The number of victims receiving services cannot be greater than the total number of victims on the demographics tab, and the sum of the services in D1 through D3 must be equal to or greater than the number of victims reported for the category on question 22. You'll see that this section also has some questions about wait lists that need to be answered. The next category of direct services is criminal civil justice system assistance services. You can see that it is also structured the same way as the previous sections, with question 24 asking if your agency provided any services, and question 25 asking for the number of victims who received services. E1 through E11 is asking for the number of services offered in the category. And please remember, this is very important, the number of individuals receiving services in every category cannot be greater than the total number of victims on the demographic tab. And for civil criminal justice system assistance, the sum of services in E1 through E11 must be equal to or greater than the number of victims reported on question 25 of this category. The last category on the direct services tab is public presentations. This will collect information on public presentations that your agency provided during this quarter. Please see the reporting guide for the definition of a public presentation or community education. I didn't see any questions in the chat box. Julie, did you have any pop up?
I haven't seen any.
All right, then we'll go ahead and move on to some poll questions. Which type of victim should be reported on the Direct Service tab? A, new victims only, B, continuing victims only, C, anonymous victims only, D, all victims, new, continuing, and anonymous, or E, none of the above. Need some quick answers today.
Yeah, they're on it.
And it looks like everybody agrees. We do have a D in the chat.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
It looks like we all agree it's D, all victims, new, continuing, and anonymous. And yes, you guys are all correct. Good job. As I don't see any further questions, I'm going to go ahead and give it over to Julie to talk about completing the Scope of Work tab.
So the Scope of Work tab is a change from last year where the Scope of Work was removed, but this year we've added it back. And this tab will look different for every agency. The tab is based on what you put in your Scope of Work, or SOW, that was approved on your Notice of Subaward, or NOSA. So if you put something in there that's not measurable, we tried to review it and make sure that they were measurable, but if you have something that you're having difficulty collecting data on or that you can't report on, just contact Jean or myself and we can work with you to get a subaward amendment done to change that. But hopefully you have measurable items on your Scope of Work. This is what the tab will look like. Yours will have something filled out in the target, and goals and objectives are pulled from the NOSA. It's hard to show an example because everybody's is different. So these all will look a little bit different, but please remember to fill out that tab. I haven't seen any questions, so I'm just gonna hand it over to you, Jean, to talk about verifying the data.
Perfect. Now that we have the form filled out, we're going to go ahead and verify that the data is accurate. Let's look at the Summary tab. Did any services increase or decrease significantly? When we say a significant increase or decrease, we're looking at changes of 10% or more. If they did and the data is accurate, please note this and the reason why in your email when you submit your report. Are there any sections missing or not completed? Did the numbers match what the system you use to track individuals shows? We're next going to look at the Demographic tab. Are there any cells shaded red? Did you specify any answers that required a specification? Next, we're going to look at the Direct Services tab. Do you have service counts for all service categories that your agency offers? Are the number of services offered in each category greater than or equal to the number of individuals served? They should be. Finally, we're going to take a look at the Scope of Work tab. Did you complete this, and does it match your backup documentation for your particular agency? Since we don't have any questions, I'm going to go ahead and give it to Julie on how to submit the report.
So to submit the report, you're going to save the report with the name of your agency and the quarter in the title. So an example is below of what we'd like to see. So your agency name, ML, and Q1 for your first report, and then Q2 for your second report, Q3, Q4. This really helps us in getting your report saved and not having to rename everything to put them in your folders and review. You're going to email that report with that name to DCFS grants@dcfs.md.gov. You can CC Jean and myself if you'd like, but it's not necessary. Please remember to email it to that DCFS grants inbox. That way, if Jean or I are out of the office, someone will be able to log that your report was received. Remember in the body of the email to explain any significant changes in the numbers from
Oops, it looks like Julie cut out a little bit. So just remember to explain any significant changes in the number from previous reports, and then you should receive an email confirmation of receipt within 3 business days. The next thing we're going to talk about are the quarterly report due dates. The first quarter of July, August, and September are due Friday, October 15th. The second quarter, October, November, and December are due Friday, January 14th. This is the only date that's a little bit different from our normal due date of the 15th of the month because the 15th falls on a Saturday. Quarter 3 is January, February, March. It's due Friday, April 15th, and quarter 4, April, May, and June is due Friday, July 15th. We want to make sure that agencies remember that they are required to maintain backup documentation for all questions in this workbook. Backup documentation can be electronic systems that your agency has in place to document the questions in their quarterly reporting form. It can also be your intake forms, assessments, or whatever else your agency uses to show that each individual is unique and only being counted once. Always remember it's a good idea to reference the GERS. The quarterly report GER is GER 2226. These are very general as they cover all GMU grants. And if we were to put all the information for each quarterly report in the GERS, it would end up being like 1,000 pages. We didn't want to do that. We wanted to just thank you guys so much for your time and participation in this training. At this time, if you have any questions, go ahead and either unmute yourself and ask them or ask them in the chat box, and we're happy to answer them. We thank you so much for your focus and participation in this training. Before we go, we have 2 more real quick poll questions for you. And then after that, the PowerPoint also has our contact information, some resources, and some acronyms that we used through this training. Since I don't see any questions pop up, we're going to go ahead and ask our first poll question. I learned at least one new fact about quarterly reporting during this training. I think Julie's having some connectivity issues, so I don't see the poll on the, there we go, it's on the screen. And it's totally okay if you didn't learn a new fact. We just kind of want to make sure that we're giving good information so that you guys are learning something and that these are helpful trainings. Awesome, we have 2 trues in the chat box. And it looks like everybody seems to have learned at least one new fact about quarterly reporting, so that's awesome. So these trainings seem to be helping. Our last poll question would be, how would you rate today's training? Really bad red frowny face to super happy green happy face. Awesome, it looks like everybody is super happy about today's training. And you did find it helpful, so that is awesome. We're very glad to hear that. If you do have any questions that are specific to your organization, you're always welcome to contact us. Our contact information is on the slides. We really appreciate your guys' attention and participation in today's training, and we'll give you more than an hour back of your day. Thank you so much.